Today we're suiting up with a man who's as comfortable under center at the big house as he is under fire in today's culture war.
One of the hardest working guys that I knew.
Former Michigan quarterback.
The man, the myth, the legend.
He's one of the co-hosts of the Daily Wire's Crain Company.
The Michigan man.
David Cohn.
Today on Crain Company, the war on women's sports. Occasionally you need to showcase what it takes to get on the line.
You have this music career, and I've fallen in love with it.
Something about being at the Daily Wire is people say, you guys save sports for me. Don't retreat to neutrality. Not me and not us. You got the wrong David Cohn.
You're a man that loves this country.
Masculinity encompasses virtue within it.
David's message is clear. Buckle up. The play clock is running. The stakes are eternal. And there is no instant replays in the fight for truth.
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. And they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? Ay, and we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. Ay, we the people like Garcia, so that's no excuse.
Welcome back, Patriots, to We the People, your weekly hit of faith, family, and freedom. Today, we're suiting up with a man who's as comfortable under center at the big house as he is under fire in today's culture war. David Cohn, former Michigan quarterback, co-host of Crain Company, and the Daily Wire columnist who refuses to punt on the truth. You've read his words. Saving women's sports should not require so much effort. His rallying cry to protect female athletes from biological males. The reminder that Khari Willis left a multi-million-dollar NFL contract because, in his own words, he wanted to, quote, devote the remainder of my life to the further advancement of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And his Independence Day wake-up call that our debt, broken borders, and godlessness are dragging us off the path the founders blazed almost 250 years ago. And of course, the moment America dropped to both knees in prayer, not protest, when Damar Hamlin's heart stopped on the gridiron. David's message is clear. If everything is labeled racist, nothing truly ever gets called out. If every touchdown dance is politics, then the real game gets lost. And if every knee bends for outrage, none remain for reverence. So today, we're talking courageous fatherhood, virtuous masculinity, and how to win the cultural Super Bowl without selling our souls. We'll ask David why the left fears strong men who kneel only to God, how to reclaim patriotism in the locker room, and what it takes for America to win again, on the field, in the home, and in the hearts of our kids. Buckle up. The play clock is running. The stakes are eternal, and there is no instant replays in the fight for truth. This is We the People, and it's game time. Welcome, David.
Man, what a fantastic intro right there. I'm honored to be here today. There's nowhere else I'd rather be than talking with you, Gates. And man, after hearing some of those old articles that I've written, I just need to pay you to walk around with me every single day and just hype me up.
Well, I'm a diehard Gator, so as a Michigan man, there might be a little bit of a conflict of interest, but on just about everything else, we're aligned. So I'll hype you any day of the week, David.
I came on this show without knowing that you were a Florida Gator, man.
Well, depending on what sports season we're in, sometimes I hide that. Basketball, though, now we're doing well. So all right, let's dive in. So Crain Company, Daily Wire, strangers to no one. You all specialize in feeding this hunger for true reality, not ideology. But I'm concerned that, others are out there aren't feeding the hunger as much as they should be. How do we continue to feed this hunger for truth and reality in a world that wants to live in the unreal?
Well, the main thing that I've seen since I've been doing this in front of a camera professionally is to be authentic. To be your raw self in every way imaginable. And I think you can see that with some of the top people at this game. Say whatever you will about Joe Rogan and whether or not you consume his content or not. That dude is himself, and he's going to be himself whether he's talking about UFC or whether he's talking about comedy. And, in many respects, I'm the same way. And there have been times where I've scratched my head and thought, am I spreading myself too thin with all of the different interests that I have? Would I have more success if I just focused in on one area area and one thing, but that's just not how I go about my life. And so I try and reflect that to the people who engage with our show and our content that, yeah, I love sports. I played sports. I talk about sports. I love America. I love talking about our culture. I love going on a rant, a get off my lawn rant whenever I see something that's wrong. So I'm going to talk about that. I love music. I love movies. I was a movie producer for a while. I record music. I'm going to talk about that stuff. And so I just try and be myself. I think my co-hosts do as well. And, there is an aspect to this of quality versus quantity, at least what I've seen since we joined the Daily Wire. And this was the beginning of 2022 when Ben Shapiro called us and we came over from Colin Cowherd's network at The Volume. And I absolutely love Colin. I love everything that he's built. I enjoyed working with his team. But something about being at the Daily Wire is people reach out to us every day and say things like, you guys save sports for me. Like I was about to give up on sports in this country with the direction that ESPN is heading or the direction that the athletes on the field are going, but your show saves sports for me. And then something else we'll hear is, I thought I was just tuning into a sports show, but actually you guys talk about life. You give me a lot of good life lessons. I feel like I'm watching you and your families grow in real time because I talk about my family all the time. Jake has a newborn daughter. He talks about his family. And so we try and make that a part of the product that we put out, and we made it a mission at the very beginning to keep profanity down to a bare minimum on our show, and those sorts of things are how we wound up at the Daily Wire. And you can certainly tell, even in an industry, and I know you have to deal with it as well, that's constantly thinking about quantity of views, how many clicks, how many views, how many engagements. There really is something to be said about the quality of listeners that we have, and those are the people who really spread your missional statement on a daily basis, and we're really thankful for them.
Yeah, I think this sort of movement to new media over the last 5 to 10 years has given people the ability to find truth. All these platforms out here like yours, like mine, it doesn't so much feel like listeners are eavesdropping on a conversation. It's starting to feel more like people are participating in a conversation. A lot of things you said in that answer are sort of going to frame our episode. We're definitely going to talk about your music career. We're going to talk about the role of sports in sort of the greater culture and society. But I want to go back to truth. One reason our side has won so many over is because we do speak truth, and where we've spoken some of the most truth is in the role of gender in society. You've been very vocal about the role of men and women in society, and so far a big theme on this show has been the same thing, and we've had a lot of women come on the show championing the roles of femininity, the roles of motherhood as a vocation, the role of women in society. I'd personally like to see more men, you're a quarterback, sort of quarterback the issue of men in society. We've been told that masculinity is toxic. I tend to think masculinity is more virtuous. But what do you have to say about the role of masculinity in society, and what out there should men be proud to talk about when it comes to themselves?
Man, I'm so glad you asked that question, because the term toxic masculinity is one that just, it really frustrates me, because it's a contradiction in terms, and I say this about the trans movement as well. When you say the term trans man, well, you can't have a modifier of a word be the antithesis of that word, right? And I think that with toxic masculinity, it's like masculinity by definition encompasses virtue within it. That's why I also don't think we need the modifier of virtuous masculinity at the front end, because it should already be baked into the term. I think you could take this and say the same thing about the term gay marriage, right? Like marriage by definition should already encompass a male and a female component. Again, that's a whole different discussion. I'm just talking about the semantics that we use in order to communicate better within, members of our society. And so, yeah, the idea that masculinity is somehow toxic, I'll go a step further for you. Any aspects that you see in society that are being pointed out about masculinity and called toxic, whether or not you have an abusive husband or any sorts of domestic violence situations, and the media jumps at that and says that's toxic masculinity. Not only is it not that, it's effeminate behavior. Now, not feminine, effeminate behavior, and you have a situation, and look, everyone's different, everyone's trying to do the best they can in life. I understand that. I'm not trying to come down hard on anyone specifically here, but in many of these cases, not only is that behavior not masculine, but it very much is effeminate, because the man is not in tune with his masculinity. He's not leading his family. He's not being a leader within his community or his country. And then when you talk about the term truth as well, I've thought about that a lot. I graduated from the University of Michigan, which I took pride in. That's a top 3 public school in the country, and my parents were college professors. And I've watched the way the university system has really become an indoctrination center in many respects in our country. And it hurts me because my parents used the education system to better themselves and to put food on our table. And I think, okay, well, what is truth? What is there some universal truth that we should all know? And that leads me to things like, just thinking we need a new metric for intelligence. Right? Like this idea that if someone is a doctor, right? Like if you have Dr. Fauci and he tells you to go do a thing, that there's somehow intelligence already baked in. I think the ability to recognize reality should be our new metric for intelligence. And there's no better example of that than what you're talking about with this, men and women sports thing. Like that is the single biggest factor that pushed me to the right of the political spectrum. And I've been all over the political spectrum. I voted for Democrats. I voted for Republicans. There was a time in my life I thought I was a libertarian, but this men and women sports thing it's been an issue that we talk about on Crain Company ad nauseum. It's been an issue that obviously the Daily Wire has taken up with my colleague Matt Walsh, and we made the movie Lady Ballers. I mean, we had to dress up in pink and play basketball in Lady Ballers, which I will tell you, I'm excited to say as of last week is now streaming everywhere on Amazon, on Fire TV, Vudu. I don't know what Vudu is, but if you watch Vudu, it's on there. So if you want to have a good laugh at just how silly it is for men to be able to call themselves women and hoist up their trophies in sports, please go watch us in Lady Ballers.
Yeah, I think you're among a number of people that singular issue. We've actually had people on the show say the same thing, that they were somewhere in the middle, maybe somewhere center left. And that one issue, gender ideology, sort of was all it took to bring them over to the right of center, because reality is reality. And the minute we stop living in reality, it's like we're in the twilight zone. The other thing you said about doctors, experts, it's a shame. The term expert now is sort of meaningless because our, quote, experts in society aren't held accountable by the measuring system that you say we need to judge them by, or the one we have judged them by. They don't pass that test, so they change the measuring system. You bring up the institution of higher education. That's one that the left has hijacked. Another institution the left is trying to hijack and has had some success at is the traditional nuclear family. You're a father of 3. I think society is trying to erode traditional values. In some ways, they're trying to erase traditional values. So I'll ask you, what do you have to say to fathers out there? Do you have any advice for the traditional role of a father in a family? And at the same time, I know your kids are only 1, 2, and 3. So is there a father or a man that you model your fatherhood after?
Yeah, 1, 2, and 3, man. We're in the thick of it over here, and man, thankfully, I married the right woman. My goodness, she leaves me in awe every day. In terms of my advice for fathers, the first thing I would say is read The Intentional Father by John Tyson. Actually, I have a copy. I keep my copy right here. Read The Intentional Father. I'm not even getting a promo sponsorship for holding that up, but no, my son's godfather gave me that book, and I think that every father, if you're a new father especially, but any father should read that book and be intentional about the way you go about being a father. And something that he says in there is the goal is to raise children of consequence. And it doesn't say the perfect father, right? None of us are going to be that, and there's no blueprint, but be an intentional father. And then, that gets me to my own father. I was very fortunate to have a dad who was an intentional father, who poured into me and my 2 brothers every single day at the expense of his own hopes and dreams and desires and career. And, I think that my father had a similar situation with his dad. I remember my father said at my grandfather's funeral, it can't be said that, my dad can't be called a man of greatness or a titan of industry, but it must be said that he is a titan of fatherhood. And certainly I had the benefit of growing up with a dad who was like that. And so I'm trying to carry that on into my kids. And yeah, you have to go about things differently when you have a son as opposed to daughters. And I have one son and two daughters, and we're trying to do the best that we can every single day, figuring things out along the way. Just last night, right down here, we're having a conversation about what should we do with their schooling? What's the next step? How seriously do we want to consider homeschooling? How seriously do we want to consider these options that are around here? And we're fortunate to be in a very good area with some good school situations. But every single day, having these conversations with my children's mother, my wife, and then also just being present as much as possible, because a lot of times, you don't realize that these moments are precious until they become memories, and by that time it's too late. So we're trying to be as present and intentional as we can here with our kids.
I'll give some book shout outs as well. I have a 10-year-old daughter, a boy who will be 8 by the time this episode airs, and another boy that's 4.
Wow.
Meg Meeker writes some fascinating books. She wrote Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, and Strong Mothers, Strong Sons. And my wife and I read both of those books, and there were just really key actionable takeaways from those. The one piece of fatherhood that has impacted me the most is I've realized that my kids will do more that I do and do less that I say, meaning, they copy my actions more than they follow my instructions. So fatherhood's almost made me a better man, only because I know I'm being watched, and I'm being watched by a little copycat that will do most of the actions that I do, whether they even know they are or not. If they knew they were doing it, they probably wouldn't do it. And that brings me to the next part of our conversation.
I want to say one point on that,
Go ahead,
because first of all, congratulations on your 3 kids. That's awesome. And to hear you say that, it reminds me of something that's so important. And I say this to a lot of young fathers all the time, which is it's one thing to tell your kids how to live a virtuous life. And that's better than nothing, right? It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to live a virtuous life yourself and to let them watch you do it. And you really can't put a value or price tag on that.
So exactly where I was going with that. The most virtuous thing I can do is demonstrate my faith and love of God to my children. So faith plays a key component to the workings of our household. And I know faith is something that's very important to you. You're a very faithful man. You're open about your faith, but you also have a role in the media. You live a public lifestyle. So I'm curious to know how faith has shaped your role in the media. Have you ever had a moment on air where you feel like you were maybe put in a position to compromise your faith, and even at the risk of costing something, you sort of lived it out? Or has there been a moment in your life where your faith was put to the test and you said, it is what it is, and I'm going to act on my values?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll answer it within the context of really my whole life. I mean, I grew up in a Christian household, and there were Christian values that were placed on myself and my 2 brothers. And I carried that all the way up to, like you said, I went to the University of Michigan and played football there. And then when I got done and didn't make it to the NFL and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my next step, and I moved to Atlanta to get into film production and video production, and was writing songs, and really these creative inspirations poured out of me the second that I no longer had the regimented schedule of a college football program. That's when I had drifted the farthest from my faith, and really that's when I needed it the most, because it was the first time I was living, one, without my family anymore, but then second, without my second family, 120 guys on a football team. And that's when I drifted the furthest from my faith, and I hadn't yet met a wife. I hadn't yet started a family. And so that was a very critical period where I just had to look down in some respects and say, no, there are some things that you need to be doing better. And one of my favorite Jordan Peterson quotes is, that which you need most can be found where you least want to look. Right. And there were some things that I needed most in my life, and I didn't want to look in certain places because I was trying to build up a new career, or because I had certain, preconceived notions, or wanted to, study more philosophical endeavors. And really, you realize that, all roads lead back to the same point. It's just, are you going to just stay there permanently, or do you have to go all the way around, the world to get back to where you started? And so fortunately for me, I was able to find a woman who also shared a strong faith, and she grew up in a Christian household as well. And so it's been easy to be able to raise our children in this environment. As far as being on air, like I said, before we joined the Daily Wire, not so much a faith thing, but there would be certain situations. You have to remember, like, we were coming out of COVID when this sports show started. And so, yeah, there were certain things specifically with vaccines and coaches being fired. And we wondered, should we be talking about this? Is this within the purview of what we need to report on? And then when Ben Shapiro called us to join the Daily Wire and said, not only are you allowed to talk about any of these cultural aspects that you want, but I'm mandating that you do. Please share your thoughts with our audience. And so it is very refreshing to walk into a place where at any moment I can just share what's in my heart with our listeners, and that is encouraged by our executive team.
Yeah, and I know anybody that's watching or listening to my show shares your values, and there is a sports demographic out there. There's a community out there that hungers for a sports program that shares their values. So I would just highly encourage anybody to watch and listen to Crain Company, and they'll know that their life values are checked at the door, and they can enter into a sports environment that shares that with them. So speaking of sports, you cover this world. You talk about it a lot. You played in it. You write about it a lot, and you've written that we were told tolerance was the goal, but it wasn't. Acceptance was, and now we're told that sort of celebration is the goal. David, athletes. I'm very curious to know what the locker room culture is like now in professional sports and even college sports. It certainly seems like more conservative athletes are coming out of the closet and living out or demonstrating their values a little bit more. I mean, it was kind of fun during the NFL season to see the Trump dance at many of the games. But I mean, where are we? Why aren't more conservatives so vocal about their values?
Well, a couple things there. One, back to what I was saying about libertarianism. I think when you have especially football, a locker room that's just so vast in terms of the numbers, you got 100+ guys on a college football team. You got, 65 guys on an NFL roster. You have a lot of different personalities. And I think a lot of people do want to try their best to be like libertarian in nature. What was the Wedding Crashers quote? I'm not okay. You're not okay, but that's okay. It'll all be okay. Well, like I said about the Jordan Peterson quote, sometimes, no, it's not okay. Sometimes you need to hear what you don't want to hear. Right. And I know you being a father, same here. It's like, no, I wouldn't be a good dad if I just let my child run out and do whatever they wanted. I mean, sometimes they need to hear the thing they least want to hear. And the same applies to us in society as well. As far as the current pulse goes, when you say conservative athletes, what I'd like to do is just to have, a center ground here where just athletes who may be apolitical can recognize insanity when they see it. Like if you have some really strong convictions, I mean, if you're Harrison Butker and the way that he's, the kicker for the Chiefs, the way that he's spoken out and has these very specific values and pillars, hearing him speak out, that's awesome. But can we just get a semblance of normalcy here without everything being about race or everything being about victimhood or everything being about some complaint? And this is, this applies to the college level too, with the state that college athletics is going through with the NIL and the transfer portal. And, we could do just a whole episode on that. But I do think that many athletes around the country recognized how insane the last 4 years have been. They started to say, no, I'm not buying that. And then with all of this popularity of Donald Trump this second time around, with it being, across the entire country, really, the entire landscape of these Trump dances that you're talking about, and people feeling free once again, just to say like, yeah, I voted for this guy, or free to at least say, no, I'm not talking about politics. I'm not going to feel pressured to endorse Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Like, you're not going to pressure me into that anymore. To me, that was a positive sign. And I hope that President Trump and his administration is able to capitalize on that by making all the right decisions here moving forward. And so far, it does seem that they're doing that, and they're capitalizing on all the momentum that really he singularly, not the Republican Party, but Donald Trump singularly was able to make a real shift there.
Yeah, what frustrates me about the left, especially in the sports world, is it's not enough for someone on the right to just even be silent.
Yep.
We have to participate in some of their nonsense for it
And
to be
celebrate.
and celebrate it. That's what you say in your writing. It's like if they want to kneel for the national anthem, well, I don't want to. I just let me stand like people have stood for 250 years. But no, I have to kneel with them. It's nonsense. But I do sense, I mean, it's such a played out term, but I do sense a vibe shift. I think courage is contagious. And for every conservative athlete we see living their values out or vocalizing their values, you tend to see another one and then another one. So I do like the momentum that
But
we're
that
on.
can lead to complacency, Gates.
Correct.
That can really lead to complacency.
Absolutely.
And it's one of the conversations that I have frequently around here at the local cigar shops and places that I spend time in. Let's make sure that, that we can't just go out there and like get a president elected and think, you know what, we've done our job there. No, all of this stuff is local. This is communal. This needs to be a grassroots effort, the way that a lot of leftists in mentality have operated for a long, long time. And you can never let the foot off of the gas here. And you shouldn't. I mean, every single day we should be waking up thinking, what problems can I solve today? How can I be a good steward of my community? How can I be a good leader of my family and my country? And if enough people do that, I do think America can have a long lifespan.
Yeah, to use a football term, we can't just dance in the end zone. What happens after you score a touchdown? The ball gets kicked off and you go right back on defense. And we have to live that way with our values as well. Now there are, I want to say, two areas, not just in sports, but in culture where more in sports where we do similar, we do see things kind of celebrated from both sides most of the time. That's faith and country. And you've talked about athletes, you've written about athletes that have retired at the peak of their career to praise God. We mentioned them, some of them in our monologue intro to this episode. You've mentioned Pat Tillman. He made sacrifices that were significantly higher than the calling of football. They were the calling of not just his country, but he gave his life. I think that sports play a very critical role in society, but I think we need to put them in our proper place. David, where do you think sports should be put in the greater society?
Man, I love that you asked that question because it certainly is not someone who's just obsessed with their favorite team and they're sitting on the couch and they use it as an opportunity to fill their belly with potato chips and maybe place a big bet or something. I mean, all of that has its time and its place, right? But I've always thought about sports as a public utility, as a public good. Look, I mean, hopefully we can get to a place in this world where we're not going to war constantly. That's the ideal, right? And sports really came about as sort of a simulacrum from war, right? Like when we're not going to war with each other, we need to at least simulate battle so that young men stay in shape and stay fit. Well, I'd like for there to be more sports and less war, right? And so from that perspective, all of the things and the values that I derive from sports, specifically football, but really anything that you're engaged with, and I played all of them growing up, the discipline, punctuality, the responsibility, and knowing that no one's coming to save you. And then also as far as team sports go, knowing that you're responsible for your brother beside you and that your failures can have lifelong lasting physical consequences to one of your best friends, someone you may be a roommate with, or have to, someone who's going to be in your wedding or be the godfather to your child or something. You have a responsibility to them on the field. That's when really we are getting everything that we should be getting out of sports. And it's not just some mindless distraction. And that's how I go about my business. And that's how we as a show typically like to approach sports. Then when you talk about these athletes who are really standing on business as relates to their faith and things, I think of Coach Tony Dungy. I've never met him personally, but everything that he seems to stand for out in the public, I'm a really big fan of. David Pollock is another. I do know David Pollock personally, and everything that he's doing and the messages that he sends on a daily basis. And anytime that he comes on our show, Crain Company, those are just a couple guys that they really are an inspiration.
Tony Dungy's a resident of Tampa here where we record the show. So this community loves him, embraces him. He was a great coach for us, but he wasn't just a coach. He was a leader of men. He was he wasn't coaching football. He was using football to teach young men how to be greater men. So he's very admired in this country. David Pollock, I mean, another one, a man whose wife is going through a tremendous tragedy right now, but the way he speaks about it is so hopeful, so uplifting. He's not just a model for athletes to follow; he's a model for men to follow. All right, so you wrote an article. This show loves America, and we love to celebrate faith, family, and freedom, and love of country. And you're a man that loves this country, and you wrote an article for Independence Day about how America can win again. You sort of you stress the significance of a cohesive identity. So how do you believe that America can reconcile having such a diverse population but also being unified at the same time?
Yes, and the article you're mentioning there was when I guest hosted Matt Walsh's show, which was quite an honor. I got to guest host 4 episodes for him when he went on vacation a year ago during Independence Day. And, I just, again, I do what I always do. I spoke from the heart on those episodes, and I hope that they resonated with a lot of Matt's audience. But yes, I mean, the melting pot nature of America, that part's not going to change, right? And that may not change for any countries in the world, even European countries. But America, like being as diverse as we are, even doing what we need to do in terms of saying, hey, we need to at least put some restrictions on our border, who comes in our country and who comes out of our country, and let's make sure they're American citizens. That part's just common sense, but you're not going to completely change the demographics of what America is. And we shouldn't need to, right? We should be able to use our different demographics as a strength. And I think that we have done that for a long time. But if diversity, and just this is, again, diversity of thought, not necessarily even ethnicity or anything like that, but if we're not able to use the different diversity of thought that we have in America here, if that experiment fails here, it's going to fail everywhere in the world. I mean, when you think about Japan, you think about Japanese people. Japan's not a melting pot, right? I don't know if how much longer that can continue. I've never been to Japan. I don't know what their long-term goals are. But if diversity fails here, best believe it's not going to be tried elsewhere around the world at everyone who's looking up at America. And make no mistake, in many respects, they want this country to fail. But I do think that there are a lot of people around the world and a lot of other countries who don't want America to fail because they recognize what that would mean for the rest of the world. And again, we have to stop thinking so much at a federal level. It has to be communal. It has to be regional. It has to be local. Do the best you can. And this is why I do think Jordan Peterson's message resonated so much 7 or 8 years ago when he really hit the scene with just something as simple as clean your room. And the pushback always shocked me on that, where it's like, no, clean your room can't solve climate change. Like, are you crazy? No, but if you clean your room, and everyone else cleans their room, everything else is cleaner. And then guess what? You have the ability to take on the next task. And then if you can execute that, then you can take on the next task. And before you know it, your life is in order. And maybe then you're helping someone else out, a family member. And then if you have enough will to help yourself and a family member, now you can help someone in the community. And all of a sudden, if everyone does this, man, you're looking at a stronger America overnight.
I'll give another book shout out. Admiral William McRaven, who led the capture mission for Osama bin Laden, wrote the book Make Your Bed. And it was a sort of an expanded version of the commencement address he gave at the University of Texas. This is probably going back 10 years. But his message is that if you start every day by making your bed, you have started every day by completing a task. And
Yes.
if you carry that mindset throughout the rest of your day, things will start to compound quickly and you will end the day with this completed day. So your message is very similar to Jordan's of cleaning your room, just personal accountability.
And anyone who would push back on what you just said, Gates, anyone who would say, no, that's silly, or you're asking too much to even make my bed, again, they aren't looking at the place that they most need to look.
That's right. That's right. So let's double down on this diversity question and talk about race, because this is another topic that you've written about, that you've talked about. You've said that, it's not enough to just be not racist anymore. You have to be anti-racist. And we've seen books titled How Not to Be an Anti-Racist or something like that. I haven't read the book. How do you interpret this shift in societal expectations and its potential consequences? I mean, how do you differentiate between, genuine efforts to combat racism and then what you describe as, and I'm quoting you, semantic manipulation?
Sure. Well, as far as that goes, like we can't even come up with a definition on what is or is not racist. And I mean, forget this idea, this new idea of, well, no, you can only be racist if you're a white person. I mean, that goes to a whole different level where I can do nothing but laugh. I'm even talking about before then. Like, is it just as simple as applying group characteristics to an individual? But what about if I'm saying something positive? What if I say, man, black people are great dancers? Is that racist? I mean, I'm saying something that's a good, I'm giving a compliment, but I'm applying group characteristics to individuals like writ large across a community. And part of the reason that I feel able to talk about this is because of my own upbringing. I come from South Georgia, and I hate to always, people oftentimes say like, oh, well, I have a couple black friends, so I can't, that whole thing. But like literally, like these guys are my brothers, like I've gone into like, I don't want to say battle. I mean, a football field is not a battlefield, but I mean, like we said before, when there are physical consequences and you're relying on that guy, oftentimes for a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, it is a battlefield. And so I've gone and I've played sports with these guys my whole life. And a lot of times we get together and we just laugh at this nonsense, right? I don't think that America is suffering from racial tension or even class tension as much as ideological disagreements. That's really the thing. And look, if you see yourself as a victim and you see yourself as someone who doesn't want to take up the mantle of responsibility that every person should be doing, then you're going to find an excuse and you're going to lean on the lowest hanging fruit. And if that's race for you, you'll lean on that. If that's some LGBT initiative or whatever, you'll lean on that. If it happens to be a sex-based or a gender initiative, you'll lean on that. And trust me, the excuses are plentiful. And so as it relates to race, again, at the local level, when I interact with people, I don't experience that as much, and I'm grateful for that. And so I think a lot of times we do need to keep in mind that real life is not social media, and that would help everybody moving forward.
Well, I would say that I do think you were in battle. I mean, you're playing quarterback at Michigan. There's 330-pound men trying to take your head off, and there's another 330-pound man trying to stop him from doing that. Sounds like battle to me. And you've got 115,000 people, watching it all oiled up. But the whole race thing, I think the more we talk about it, the more racist it becomes, the more we focus on these, like, let's focus on what's similar than what's different. I think the whole race movement, I mean, it goes back to Jesse Jackson long before BLM, but BLM has just sort of accelerated things. They don't want to solve racial issues in America because that will put them out of business. The day Black Lives Matter solves racism, they don't have a job anymore. They don't make money anymore. And we know how much money they make. So, I just, it's all hypocrisy. And I think society's finally, starting to catch up to that.
And it took me reading Thomas Sowell to really understand the points that you're making. And again, I was more center or left of center coming out of the University of Michigan. No surprise there, right? But, when I finally did come across Thomas Sowell and actually read his works, not just a quote here or there, but really actually read his writings at the age of, 26, 27, 28, something like that. That's when I really started to understand the points that you're making there. Is like, oh no, grifters is a real term, and grifters don't want to solve problems, because then they don't have a job anymore.
Yeah. I mean, let's just keep riffing on book recommendations. Anything Thomas Sowell has written, anybody should go out and read. And Jason Riley is sort of Thomas Sowell 2.0. And he actually he's a great writer himself, covers the same topics. He wrote a book about 3 years ago called Maverick, which is sort of the life story, autobiography or biography of Thomas Sowell. So that's recommended reading for viewers and listeners of this show as well. All right. Let's lighten up the material a little bit. This is what I really want to talk about. You have this music career, and I've fallen in love with it.
Thank you.
Before I even listened to your songs, I just looked at the titles and I'm like, I don't even care what they sound like. I'm going to love this stuff. I mean, you have titles like American Made, and to quote that song, have some pride when we see it stamped in the USA. We used to stand up for the land of the free and the home of the brave. I'm going to tell my son to let old glory wave. We're playing that in my truck every day for the kids. Another song, Just What America Needs. You say she likes social living, not socialism. A few more like her, this country would be okay. She sounds kind of hot. My words, not yours. And your new single, Thompson Station Train. So I know you've got this. We're not calling it an EP. It's sort of like an extended album that's coming out in the fall. I want to hear more about this music. I mean, I did listen to the songs. I mean, they've got this upbeat, positive vibe to them. They're patriotic. They're songs that you can, play in the gym, play in the truck with your kids. Tell me about this avenue of your career and how it's an expression of your values.
Man, first off, I can't thank you enough for even bringing it up. I do enjoy discussing my music, especially right now when I'm working on a new album. Just tracked, actually, a brand new album this Tuesday night with Mr. Kent Wells. He's Dolly Parton's producer right here in Nashville.
Wow.
Sang vocals last night. I'm singing vocals again tonight. Hopefully, we'll be targeting a first week of August release for this. And again, I don't know which songs exactly are going to make the cut. We're reviewing all this stuff right now this week, deciding which ones we really love. And the 6 songs that I tracked with him last year will all be on that album as well. And some of those, like you're talking about, Just What America Needs and American Made, I wrote those. One of those I wrote, Just What America Needs, I had written 90% of back in Atlanta. And when I came here to Nashville and decided that I did want to record some new music, and Kent Wells heard some of my stuff and decided to give me a chance, I was like, man, that song has to go on there. And, in this industry, when most of the time you don't hear anything back, but when you do, it's usually a no. It really felt good for someone like Kent to tell me, yes, I love these songs. I want to record these songs. I want to produce them. And so we added Just What America Needs, and then American Made was one that I just wrote. And again, I wasn't necessarily trying to write super patriotic songs, and all the lines you mentioned right there, that'll resonate with your audience, but you could mention those lines in a song that's still a bad song, right? So I think that I did the best I could to make the song good first. And then if it has a message underneath, like, that's great too. And we released those during a presidential campaign year, and both of those songs got added to Donald Trump's playlist, which I'm very proud to say.
Wow.
I won't say that I single-handedly got the guy elected, but it was quite an honor. But, just going back, throughout my life, my father was a big fan of music, and he was a DJ at a radio station when he was growing up. So I was constantly listening to his music, even more than mine. The Everly Brothers and Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Marty Robbins, all these influences. And then I started listening to Creedence Clearwater and the Eagles. And then over time, it became more and more hip hop. The more and more that I got into sports, the more it was exclusively rap and hip hop. And certainly that played a large part into the music that I made when I got out of the University of Michigan, didn't go to the NFL. Again, all these like creative initiatives started pouring out of me, and I taught myself how to play guitar because that's the most versatile versatile instrument that you can travel with and take with you, and it's not like a big piano. And I like some of the percussive stuff that you could do with the right hand. And so in Atlanta, when I would play shows and people would come out, most people would say, "Oh, you sound a lot like Jack Johnson," or "You sound a lot like John Mayer." And those that alone was a compliment, because certainly I was taken a lot of inspiration for those guys. But I would say over the years, given how I've grown in my personal and political views, and being here in Nashville, everything that I'm recording is very steeped in the Americana, country music, Southern rock vibe. And so if you're interested in that kind of music at all, I'd really appreciate if you would check out my page and check out any music I'm releasing. And we'll have some new songs by the end of the summer.
Yeah, it's David Cohn on Apple and Spotify and all that. I see your guitar there over your shoulder. One thing I appreciate about your music, country, folk, sort of that kind of traditional rock sound, is you actually have instruments in your music. I mean, I'm a diehard country music fan, but half of the stuff coming out today is clap track this and clap track that. And it's
so you're a big country music fan.
Huge country music.
And so you really enjoyed the tracks you listened to?
Loved them, man. I mean, I'm also a concert junkie. I mean, music plays a pivotal role in my life. I mean, I can literally place myself in time based on when various songs came out. I mean, I've been to 32 Kenny Chesney concerts.
Oh.
I mean, I'm a freak when it comes to music, and particularly country music and the more sort of folk kind of Southern rock style that you're doing. So I'm a big fan of the genre. I know how to critique it a little bit, and you're 10 out of 10, man. I'm not saying that because you're on my show. I mean, you can go.
Man, that really means a lot, brother.
We've been playing it in the truck, man. All right, so last question, and we sort of always kind of do some version of this with all our guests. I'm really excited to hear this answer from you, because since I've gotten to know you, I got off the phone with you the first time we talked, and the guy that introduced us, I called him up. I said, man, that's just one of the David's just a vibe, man. And that's how I am. I'm a vibe. I mean, attitude is a choice. Hope is a choice. There's light and dark everywhere in the world. And it's what you choose to focus on. You can't be ignorant to the dark stuff, but it's a choice to live your life with a certain attitude. I get that from you. I get positive energy, positive vibes from you, a good attitude. So the word I'm sort of funneling all this down to is hope. I'm a hopeful person. You seem like a hopeful person. So for our audience, what gives you hope right now for America?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, thank you for your kind words. I'll tell you what gives me hope is every single day that I walk in this house right here and I got these 3 babies who are learning to talk and to speak, and they run up to me and they say, Dad, welcome home, or they wave bye to me when I'm leaving the house. I mean, again, talking about cleaning your room and handling your situation and making sure your life is in order before you try and go out and solve the problems of the world. You know, I try and make that a part of my mantra every day to make sure that I'm leading this family. Then if I'm leading them, I can go out and lead my community. And so to see it happening here with my family and these kids and trying to be a positive environment, and I see it happening in the community here, the neighbors' kids, they're doing the same thing. We have a healthy environment here. That gives me hope. And then more broadly, the community, like I said before, these interactions that I have most of the time. Now, yes, there are bad apples everywhere. You can go to the convenience store and run into someone who's just, a complete jerk, and you're going to have that everywhere you go. But most of the interactions that I have on a daily basis, they are fruitful interactions. And I think we do need to remember that real life is not social media. And social media and establishment media and all of the technology that we're using, it has taken over our lives. Even for my work, and I'm sure you're the same way, I have to be on my phone constantly to be able to be good at my job and to make the money that supports my family. But I also have to remember this has a very specific place on the totem pole, and it's not very high up. And all of the vitriol that I experience on social media, where people can anonymously say whatever they want and they say these hateful things, we have to understand that's not real life most of the time. There's a reason the phrase touch grass exists. Let's go out, touch grass, and be with other people in our community. We put that at the forefront of everything we're trying to do, and I think we will have a stronger country.
Well, amen to that. Look, I hope people go listen to your music. I hope they read your writing on Daily Wire. I hope they watch Crain Company. We really, really, really appreciate you coming on. I really, David, only have one other thing to say. Go Gators.
Go blue. Go blue. Hey, did you, so were you at Florida? What years were you at Florida?
I went there for my MBA. So
okay, for your MBA.
This was 10 years ago.
The only reason I ask is because Coach Lloyd Carr, the head coach at Michigan, who recruited me, who I played for 2 seasons, his final game was this Capital One Citrus Bowl down there. That would have been January of 2008 when Michigan played Florida. That was Tim Tebow's Heisman year. It was in between y'all's 2 national championship years, and that was one of the best football games I've ever been involved in. And we came out on top in that one, and we sent Coach Carr off with a win. But what a cool environment to play Florida in the state of Florida, and Tim Tebow was a quarterback in my recruiting class as well. And so that felt really good to win that one. But much respect and congrats on the basketball national championship this year.
Appreciate it, David. Good talking to you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. How they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? And we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. We the people like Garcia, so there's no escape.